I don't think it's any secret that I have really specific taste in people. I get kind of annoyed, and it's one of those things that I try not to indulge too much in. I'm one of those people who, if there's someone I don't like, I usually won't want to talk to them. And it's one of the reasons why I spend so much time in here reading and making videos, is that with most people, I just don't gel with them very well. I just don't seem to vibe with a lot of normal people, to use a kind of a broad term. But for the friends that I do have and for the people that I do connect with, I really connect with them because those people, they understand where it is that you're coming from. And it isn't so much that we have similar worldviews, it's more so that we agree on enough of like the basic things like respect and, being nice to each other, that, even with someone who I might argue about topics with all the time, we might disagree on so many things, because we have that mutual sense of respect, and because we find each other's ideas interesting and we provide one another support, it's going to be a good friendship. Whereas I feel like with a lot of people, I just get kind of bored of the conversations I have with them just because we don't talk about topics that we're both interested in. Like, I'm not interested in sports, I'm not interested in, talking about the weather, these types of things. I'm introverted. I love people, but I'm also introverted. So I try to seek connections that are very meaningful, close connections. I have a lot of acquaintances on the internet, and a lot of that is just because I just don't talk to people very often. Like, even with my closest friends, I don't talk to them all the time. That's just how I am. Um, and so, I think with people who you're really close with and who you really love, that's going to make you stronger in the end, because once you find that connection that really does mean something, like I think of my friend Korax Catalyst, for instance, or my friends who run the Shonen Ronin channel with me. Like, I will always be able to talk to those people because the chemistry that we have in conversations just works so well. Like, I'll make a joke or something, and then immediately they'll get that joke because we're operating on the same plane. We have a lot of the same interests, and so if I make like a weird esoteric reference and I try to tie it into something else, they're gonna get that reference and it's gonna make sense to them. I think that's the core of understanding between two people, is that, like, it's about how you flow in the conversation, your chemistry between one another. Like, I can talk to most people, but the thing is that I just won't be interested in it because the chemistry won't be there, because I'm interested in such specific things. It doesn't mean they're bad guys, it just means that I find the conversation kind of boring and I'm not really willing to engage with them because I have these very specific set of interests. And so with people who I do find interesting, who I might not necessarily agree with, but who I find to be, good, well-rounded people, interesting people who, understand what it is that I'm saying and, like, understand where I'm coming from, I find those connections to be really valuable. And when I find people like that, I get incredibly close to them. And I think there's an element of courage that you have to be able to do that. Because if you don't seek out the connection in the first place, you're not going to be able to get it. I think there is someone out there who's going to be your friend. There's someone out there for every single person. Even if you're the most solitary guy who has the weirdest interests, like, being obsessed with, like, the mechanics of trains or something, just find someone else who has that interest, or find someone who accepts you for having that interest and will listen to it. Like, there's always going to be someone who vibes with you, who has a good enough chemistry to just work with you. And I think once you seek out that person and you find them, you're gonna be a lot happier because it's about love. Now, I'm not like a big proponent of human nature. I don't believe human nature is, the thing that guides all of us, just because I think everything that exists is natural. So every single person who has existed and everything that occurs is a result of natural causes, otherwise it wouldn't exist. So I'm not going to sit here and say that, like, love is in human nature's interests, but empirically, statistically speaking, people like to love each other. They like to have these connections. And I mean, if you're going to talk about like societies and the way that they, they're brought up, like, go back to the old days of hunter gatherers and stuff. You literally had to be with other people in order to survive. I mean, look at the world we have today. It's the reason the world we have today functions as it does is because of cooperation, because we realize we're stronger if we work together. That if you're just out there in the woods on your own, you're probably going to die. So everything in this room, everything that I have is a result of cooperation between other people. You can't live without them. Even if you live in a cave on your own, the technology that you're using is as a result of other people learning how to do it, or as a result of societies innovating over time. The fact that you're allowed to be alive that long at all, to have vaccines and stuff to keep you alive. So intrinsically speaking, humans are always going to be connected. But on a personal level, whether or not you want to connect with someone, it's really dependent on your personality and what your interests are. My personality is so distinct that I'm not really able to connect with a lot of people on that deep, deep level. Maybe if I changed, I would, but I've tried to change so many times that, like, I've just never came out able to enjoy that type of interaction, just because I'm a very specific guy. I have a very specific set of interests, and no matter how many times I tried to change myself to be what everybody else wanted, it didn't really work. And so I had to go to YouTube to put myself out there on the internet to meet more people who were like-minded, because usually people who are similar to one another inevitably end up in the same place because they have similar interests and similar ideas, and so they're going to go to the same places to discuss those ideas. So if I make a video about Metroid or anime mecha series, someone who likes that same thing is going to show up on the video, and then I'm going to be able to connect with them more because of that. And so I think YouTube and these types of platforms in general are really, really good for meeting people like that. Because back in the old days, back when you had tribes, it was the nail that sticks out is going to get hammered down, And in worst case scenarios, a lot of people who were different, who went against the grain, they got killed because they didn't work in the society. Nowadays, now that we have liberal democracy and all these different systems that allow for different types of people to continue living, despite society all cooperating as one unit, we have a more decentralized way of life. So, people can go to the supermarket and buy food. They don't necessarily have to be with other people to go hunt food, And so we have rules and systems in place to make it to where people like me can stay alive without, being stoned to death or something. And so society has progressed to keep more people alive, to have specific rules in place to make it to where guys like us are totally fine. And I think because of the internet, people who were similar to one another, they would end up in tribes together. But like, the guy who was different didn't really have his own tribe, and he would often get thrown out, and like I said, in worst cases, killed. But this sort of tribal nature that humans have, I think the internet is really good to play on that, because a lot of it was just about mutual understanding. It was about chemistry, being able to have good chemistry with the people who you worked with. And if you go to the internet, you can try and find people with similar mindsets, similar interests, and similar chemistry, and then you can connect with them on that deep level, and you can form your own kind of tribe, and you don't have to worry about, getting hammered down, because now you can find anyone. The internet friends who you make, you can meet them in real life, and you can have that real, very special connection that you were searching for all that time. And, I think for people who are more weird, that's a very special thing. It's a very inspiring thing. And so I think it's important not to give up on that. Don't give up on love. Don't give up on having the courage to try and find it, because as long as you have that courage, as long as you have the courage to meet more people, make more friends, and to try and find the people who you really do love, based on a sense of mutual understanding, you're gonna be able to live a happier life. And maybe you're a hermit. Maybe, you're not interested in society at all. I mean, Buddhist monks have existed. They dedicated their lives to peace and solitary confinement up on mountains and stuff, and they turned out fine. Maybe you want to be like a guy like that. It existed in nature. It happened. You can be a guy like that. But I think for the vast majority of us, we're interested in connection. We're interested in finding people who we love and who love us. Those are some of the most powerful things that we can find. It's kind of encoded in a lot of us due to, the way that society functions. When you grow up and you have to survive by cooperating with other people, you're intrinsically gonna want to connect with other people. One of the first things that you do is you hatch out of your mom, and your mom takes care of you. That's a version of cooperation. It's a version of cooperation keeping you alive. And if we all cooperate with one another, to live and to work together to continue living, then that's a sign of what humanity is capable of to survive. And I think that emotional desire, ultimately where it comes from, is that because we couldn't survive otherwise. So of course we're going to have that emotional desire. Not to say that it's nature, because nature has produced many different types of people, but I think like the grand majority of people are going to feel that way just as a result of conditions. And so before you give up, before you say, I'm just totally unlikable, consider all of the people who may be similar to you, or the people who are totally dissimilar and you may connect with anyway. And, if you feel totally... My hands shake a lot, by the way. I get tremors. I have this thing where, like, my hands will literally shake all the time. It's really bad. I don't know why it happens. Like, what used to happen was my leg would, like, go up and down constantly. It doesn't really happen as much anymore. Like, I've always had, like, tremors and stuff with my hands shaking. And then, like, I'll just twitch randomly and stuff. So I apologize for the camera moving about. But I think that's really important, that sense of care, that sense of love that you can find when you confide in other individuals and you really connect and find a sense of spirit within your group. Love is very important to a lot of people, and I think if you're one of those people, you should try and seek to find it. I'm always open to different forms of life. I'm always open to people trying to live in whatever way benefits them the most, as long as they're not being unlawful, of course, as long as they're not hurting other people. Try to seek to do what you think is going to work the best for you based on your specific conditions, your specific emotions. But I think for a lot of people, that love, that care, that connection is very, very important. And thanks to the power of the internet, you can always be seeking to find it. And eventually, if you just keep trying and continue developing your social skills, you will find it. See, when I started out on here, I was very, very nervous. I shaked a lot of my videos. I choked up over my speech more than I do now. And I was very nervous, but people commented on my videos and they said, hey, keep going. I like your stuff. And so I did. And as I continued going and I got better at talking and I started using apps like Discord to speak to people, and I started making, more specific videos going into deeper topics as I grew as a person, people found me who were interested in those same topics, and I spoke to them and I became friends with them. And I never really felt like I had connections that were that special before. And when I did, it felt great, it felt like something that I always wanted. And so I think if you're someone who connects with something like that, who wants something like that, you should always be seeking to try and build yourself to a level where you're able to find something like that, to where, maybe your social skills are bad now, but if you just put yourself out there enough through mediums like the internet, you can get better at talking. YouTube is the best trainer in terms of learning how to talk better. Where, like, I still have problems talking to people who I don't really know very well, or people who have different interests. I can get really nervous. And it still happens, but with people who I know will understand what I'm saying and who I vibe with, and who have good chemistry with me, it's like night and day. I can just say words, it just happens, it just comes out, because I've practiced on this medium of YouTube for so long, and I've practiced through doing internet calls. That's the great thing, is that, like, with internet calls, your anxiety's still going to be there, but it's easier to start. If you have a lot of anxiety, it's going to be difficult to actually go out and meet people, because that physical element is really scary for a lot of people. The thought of like, what if I get beat up by someone, which is kind of irrational. Most people aren't going to beat you up, but the thought is there. The physical element can induce anxiety in a lot of people. And I think using the internet where you're kind of safe in your room at first, and then using that as like a springboard to jump off and then start going to speak to people in real life who you do connect with. I think it can be great. I think it can be great for developing speaking skills. Like, I was never particularly good at talking to my parents, for instance, but through talking on the internet and just learning how to be charismatic through, like, watching people like Charisma on Command, or like reading books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, I just developed enough research into how to speak that I got better at it over time. Like, if you just keep trying and you really try to hone in that ability to speak, you're going to get better. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to make friends and to speak to people, because life, it doesn't have like an open and shut phase. Like, you don't just start and then stop until you die. It's more about constantly trying to improve upon yourself and to learn more things and to do better than you did yesterday. And when it comes to speaking to people, that's very true. Eventually you're gonna find people who you connect with, regardless of how misanthropic you are. I mean, just look at me. Like, you're gonna find people who you vibe with, and when you do, you can use that as a way to gain more confidence and to get better at speaking, and ultimately become a happier person as a result. So, yeah. Keep doing good stuff. No, don't give up. Try to find people you care about, because ultimately love and care are going to be some of the biggest things that push us through life. My friends, they've said certain things to me, given me pieces of advice, an unbiased perspective that when I heard it and I applied it to my own life, I was like, wow, how did I not figure that out? How did I not know that what they were saying was true? It was because I was in my own head. I was allowing my heart to do all of the work instead of just thinking about what it was that I should have been doing. And because I had that second perspective to tell me, how to do these things, it 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 let me succeed in areas that I wouldn't have succeeded in otherwise. That's one of the strengths of cooperation, is that when you have people who may be similar to one another, they're gonna have tips on things that you would be doing, but you might not know how to do them. So if you have someone with more experience in the same areas, and who relates to those things, they're going to be able to help you out. And that's really, really important, because, like I said, you can't go it alone. No matter what you do, you're always going to be expanding upon ideas from other people. You're always going to be using tools that other people made or invented. And so you can't sever that connection. People are intrinsically tied, because that's how society works. You can't just go off into a forest and not participate in that, because, like, the mere fact that you're speaking a language right now, like, that's as a result of other people. People have just talked and developed language for so long that you learned how to use it. All of the ideas that you have are as a result of other people. Your experiences and your upbringing collectively culminated into you being the person that you are today. I mean, basic psychology teaches that. It's all as a result of social conditions. And so you can't ever truly get rid of it. Human beings are always going to be relying on other people in some way, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You should embrace it. You should embrace the love and the care that we're at times made to do, that it's part of our coding, it's part of who we are. And once you find someone who you truly love and connect with, the feeling that that brings about, that very, very natural human feeling, is one of the most amazing things you can get.